Well, thank you all for joining today. Good morning. I'm California Attorney General Rob Bonta, and I am joined by my colleagues, which I'm very proud to be able to do. Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser, Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell, and Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Neronha. And we're here today to announce the latest lawsuit we filed against the Trump administration for unlawfully and arbitrarily freezing $6.8 billion in education grants owed to states across the nation. Here in California, nearly 940 million, almost $1 billion is on the line. Funds, mind you, that Congress lawfully approved and appropriated, as is their job, as is their role in our constitutional democracy, a responsibility given to them by the U.S. Constitution. Congress holds the power of the purse, not the president. President Trump and Department of Education Secretary Linda McMahon have dealt a debilitating blow to our schools, throwing them into chaos just weeks ahead of the first day of school for many districts. Already ongoing summer learning programs have been forced to shut down. Thoughtful strategic budgets, staffing plans, and contracts for the upcoming school year hang in the balance. Sadly, this is just the latest in a long string of unlawful attacks on K-12 education in our country since Trump took office. And make no mistake, our kids are the ones who will suffer the consequences and are suffering the consequences. In California, more than 5,800,000 children, almost 6 million, stand in the crosshairs of Trump's campaign to demolish education in America. My colleagues and I refuse to stand idly by and allow the president to torch our children's education, care, opportunities, and futures, all the while breaking the law, violating the Constitution, and trampling over the separation of powers. Before I dive into the details, I want to acknowledge that our lawsuit is the result of the incredible partnership and collaboration of a coalition of 23 attorneys general and 2 states, and each of their teams, including the folks on my team in California, DOJ's Civil Rights Enforcement and Health, Education, and Welfare sections. So a thanks to all the team members that got us to this day. We have the honor and privilege as the attorneys general to talk about the cases and lead our teams, but this is very much a team effort, and I'm grateful for everyone's work to get us to this point. Trump and McMahon's actions are hurting children, hurting teachers and schools across the nation, which is why we're standing arm in arm from coast to coast, united in our determination to hold this administration accountable to the fundamentally American principle that every student has the right to equitable access to education. Trump and McMahon are waging a campaign to sever that access. They've made it clear that they've little regard for the law and no qualms risking our children's academic success and futures. In fact, out of the 31 lawsuits I and many of my colleagues have now filed against the Trump administration in the last 25 weeks, 8 of them challenge unlawful attacks on education. This time, the administration froze $6.8 billion in federal funding owed to states, a quarter of which should have been available July 1st. Instead, on June 30th, the U.S. Department of Education sent a 3-sentence long boilerplate email from a nondescript address alerting states that we wouldn't receive the funds we were waiting for. We were relying on, planning to use and distribute and disperse. The dismissive note came with little explanation or reasoning, let alone any legal basis. Let's be clear, Trump and McMahon have no right to hold these funds back. And in doing so, they're jeopardizing critical programs our students, families, and schools rely on, including after-school and summer learning programs, tutoring to help students in English and math, programs that train and prepare teachers so they're better equipped to teach our kids, support for children learning English, projects to improve our schools, and funding that helps ensure children who move around because their parents are migrant workers don't fall through the cracks or fall behind. Without the $6.8 billion in nationwide federal funding that's now frozen, districts and schools have been thrown into chaos, left with no choice but to consider pausing or shutting down programs and laying off teachers and staff. Some programs have already been shuttered, including summer programs that were already underway. The 21st Century Community Learning Centers at nearly 700 sites across California are on the line. These centers provide academic enrichment programs to disadvantaged children outside of regular school hours. They help students meet standards in reading and math, and during the summer, they provide meals to students, a lifeline to families in need. The Migrant Education Program, which serves 78,000 students at 20 regional programs across the state, has been hit hard by this funding freeze, and you can be sure the migrant youth and families who rely on it will feel the impact, unfortunately, feel the pain. The California Adult Literacy Professional Development Project, which trains educators who teach adult education, has been instructed to do the bare minimum to stay afloat. They've already had to end or pause contracts with educators and small businesses. Trump and McMahon are wreaking havoc on our states and schools, rocking families who count on the support and stability of these programs and holding our children back from their full potential. It's unconscionable, unlawful, and can't go unchecked. And it won't. With this lawsuit, my colleagues and I are asking the court to immediately block any attempt to withhold or delay this funding. Last week, I had the opportunity to spend the afternoon at a summer program at Bel Air Park Elementary School in Napa, California. I saw firsthand the care, compassion, education, and programming made possible by the County Office of Education, the school district, and the expanded learning team, as well as AmeriCorps tutors and mentors. I watched them make minestrone soup in their cooking class and even chopped some onions with them. I saw the art projects they were working on. I saw the exercise that they were getting, including giving me a run for my own money in zombie tag. They called it Z tag. I saw how much the program meant to those kids, how irreplaceable it is for them and their families. I talked to volunteers and educators who devoted their careers to teaching and supporting our young kids. Fortunately, so far, the county has been able to backfill the federal funding the program didn't get on July 1st. But let's be clear, that is a Band-Aid solution. Their before, after, and summer school programs are all at risk. Programs that serve the community's highest need schools. As their associate superintendent said, this freeze is, quote, yet another federal action that introduces pain and uncertainty into the educational system of our community. Trump may wrongly claim he's going after waste, fraud, and abuse, but the unfortunate irony is the long-term cost of Trump's unlawful attack on our students, families, schools, and communities is tremendous. Working parents will be left without reliable, affordable childcare. Teachers and staff will join the growing throng of unemployed Americans thanks to Trump's anti-worker policies, and students will fall behind. In 2022, out of 37 developed nations, American students ranked 28th in math and 12th in science. Those numbers don't stand a chance of improving if you slash before, after, and summer school programming, fire tutors, cut programs that teach English and support disadvantaged students, end programs that ensure our teachers are the best they can be, and prevent schools from bringing in the technology and resources they need to educate our children. President Trump can shout America first all he wants, but his anti-education agenda will only ensure we come in dead last. It shouldn't be too much to ask that the President of the United States follow the law, and yet we've had to sue him 31 times in 25 weeks for breaking the law, undermining Congress's authority, and failing to make good on federal financial obligations. As a former businessman, you'd think he'd have learned that you can't rack up a list of unpaid debts and get away with it. Our states are owed the billions in federal funding that Trump and McMahon have frozen, and we're going to court to see that it's reinstated. Before I turn it over to my colleagues to say a few words, I want to shout out the incredible public servants at California DOJ who've worked hard to make today's lawsuit possible. Jewel Boyd, Lee Sherman, Jesse Bassbaum, Elia Herrera, Emilia Morris, Christopher Tenorio, Joshua Sodheimer, Virginia Corrigan, Irina Trasobin. Thank you. It's an honor to serve alongside each and every one of you. And with that, please allow me to now turn it over to my colleague, Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser.
Thank you, AG Bonta. I am here appalled. I'm here in disbelief. It was a couple of weeks ago on July 3rd when I was talking in the western part of our state to a school superintendent who said, they've never done this before to me. I can't believe they're doing it. Our budget is now in a tenuous, untenable position because of this arbitrary, unfair, inexplicable action. Colorado, we're talking about $80 million. And as AG Bonta noted, this money is providing a number of key services. Close to 30 million of it in Colorado would be around how do we elevate instruction, including using technology. We are on the precipice right now of helping AI provide transformative opportunities to make life easier for teachers, to help personalize learning. One of the largest AI and education companies is here in Colorado, known as Magic School, and the schools that are adopting it here in Colorado are seeing great results. These grants could help that project move forward. This administration is undermining our future. We are effectively eating our seed corn. There are few investments that make more sense than what the law here requires, which is to invest in our kids and their learning, embracing technology, supporting teachers, helping our public schools be as good as they can be. We all know what a setback the pandemic was to education. Our kids have this learning loss that we still haven't made up for, and yet here we are talking about promise funding being withheld. Second, kids are suffering. There's a connection crisis. They don't have levels of mentors. In Colorado, 40% of all school kids say they don't have a mentor in their life who gives them the academic support, the personal support they need. I think about mentors I've had in school, the difference they made on me. We are now looking at a cut for student support. In Colorado, this is close to $15 million that's going to be cut, that's going to take away from what, frankly, is an area that we're already behind in. How do we support our students and help them thrive? And then also for adults, we've got a program in Colorado that's close to 10 million coming from this grant funding to help people learn to read, to learn civic literacy, to become part of our great American community. Those funds are also at risk. I sit here appalled and in disbelief. We're not talking about a closed case. Many of the cases that we brought, in fact, some of the ones we brought in education involving the mental health programs that we led a challenge on just a couple weeks ago, there's no explanation. There's no effort to appear to follow the law. There's simply arbitrary, unfair, and harmful government action, as if this administration is daring us to fight for what we believe in, to fight for what is right. Me and my colleagues will do that. We will fight for constitutional principle, in this case, the separation of powers. We'll stand for what's right, and we will have the backs of parents, of teachers, of kids who need this money, who don't want to see these harms happen. And I don't want Colorado educational leaders scrambling the way that's happening right now. We can't get this relief soon enough. It defies any understanding that we're having to have this conversation, but we're not afraid of this. We're going to do the work. This is another case where we're going to force this administration to follow the law and to make sure that Colorado gets the money that was promised to it. With that, proud to introduce the wonderful Andrea Campbell from Massachusetts. Take it away, A.G. Campbell.
Thank you, A.G. Weiser, and thank you, of course, A.G. Bonta and A.G. Neronha for your continued partnership, and yet, of course, another action to hold this federal administration accountable. I, too, remain extremely proud to be a part of a coalition in this particular case of 23 AGs and the governors of Pennsylvania and Kentucky in coming together to sue the federal administration for unlawful action, harmful action, and cruel action, where they would cut or attempt to cut $6 billion in critical educational funding, which was mandated by Congress, and hence only Congress has the power to change that funding, but to support our children and our families. This funding is critical. Of the close to $6 billion, Massachusetts was expected to receive more than $100 million to fund all types of educational programming. And this includes helping our students meet our education standards here in Massachusetts, supporting English language learners, promoting effective classroom instruction, improving school conditions and the quality of our schools, offering after-school programming and extracurricular activities for our families and our children, aiding in workforce development, and so much more. Massachusetts is the birthplace of public education. We are home to some of the best schools in the world. From kindergarten to higher ed, we lead the nation in student achievement. We firmly believe that all children deserve access to a high-quality education that meets their individual needs. And let me be clear, if this latest federal action goes unchecked, our students, our families, our schools, and our communities will absolutely suffer. The administration has proven yet again that it does not care about the well-being of our kids or the educators that are providing these services and working so incredibly hard. We are sadly just a few weeks away from the start of the new school year, and this chaos and confusion doesn't help to ensure that there's a smooth transition for everybody. Year after year, funding has been released to Massachusetts and other states by July 1st, but that changed this year. Like so many actions from this administration, this funding freeze is creating chaos and confusion as schools grapple with the start of a new year and also how they will overcome funding shortfalls created by this freeze. Local education systems have already approved their budgets. They're already developed staff plans, signed contracts to provide educational services, and now all of that is disrupted. Essential after-school programming that would flow smoothly, but for this confusion, folks are scrambling to figure out how they're going to keep their doors open, close the gaps, and find the funding they will need. And working parents are wondering what they will do about the childcare needs of their children if these programs are shut down. And to put into context, school districts expected to receive this funding on July 1st. And as AG Bonta mentioned, they received a 3-sentence email on the evening of June 30th, just one day before the funds were supposed to be dispersed, that these funds, which were mandated by Congress, were going to be withheld by the administration as the administration decided whether or not they aligned with the president's priorities. They don't have the power to do that. And they also did not express to anyone what those priorities were. This administration has repeatedly shown us that they are going to break the rule of law, that they have no respect whatsoever for the Constitution or the rule of law in this country. The president does not have the power to unilaterally decide to withhold funding that was appropriated by Congress. And not just as an attorney general, but as a public school kid, as a mom of 2 young boys attending public schools, I will use all of the tools in my office, working with colleagues all across this country to protect our children, our families, and our educators. And we will continue to hold this federal administration accountable by going to court, as we are doing today, to seek an injunction to stop this funding freeze from taking effect and to remind folks that it is unlawful and that the president does not have the power to withhold this crucial funding. I'll end by saying that AGs, we are in a unique position to hold this administration accountable. And I'm really proud to work with colleagues that understand that responsibility deeply and will continue to work with a sense of urgency to protect our families, our children, our country, and these critical services. We will not take our feet off the gas because we absolutely understand what's at stake. Really proud to work with my colleague from Rhode Island, and I'll turn it over to you, AG Peter Neronha.
Thank you, AG Campbell. You know, Rhode Islanders ask me all the time, how do we decide as a team? And we've built a strong team here across our respective states and the District of Columbia. How do we decide when to bring an action against the Trump administration? And the answer to that question is really simple. The first question we ask ourselves is, has the president broken the law? If he has, have Rhode Islanders and Americans been harmed? That's the second question. The third question is, do we have legal standing to bring an action against the administration? And on the conduct here, this was not a decision that we really had to wrestle with. In fact, it was very simple, easy decision to make to bring this lawsuit. Plainly, the president has again broken the law. We've seen this story before where the president ignores the will of the Congress, its principal power, the power that school children all across America learned and are learning today, the power of the purse. Only Congress can decide how our tax money is spent. The money that we as Americans send to Washington to be directed to protect us, to support us. Only Congress can decide precisely how that money is spent. And it's the president's job to faithfully execute the law, including the spending laws, the budgets passed by Congress. So we've seen the president violate this over and over and over again. We brought lawsuits, several of them right here in Rhode Island, where this lawsuit is also being brought, but elsewhere in Massachusetts and across the country, because the president simply just doesn't have that power. So clearly he's violated the law. Has he harmed Rhode Islanders and the residents of our states and the District of Columbia? Of course he has. He's taken money out of the hands of educators and children to work towards some purpose, which is in some ways obvious, to allow him to be able to afford, they are affordable under any circumstance, the tax cuts he wants to give to rich Americans. But the effects that he will have on America as a whole, by ignoring the importance of education in the public schools, is incalculable. We know that our economy, the success of our economy, both in the present and long term, depends on the education of Americans and Rhode Islanders. And every step that the president takes to harm education harms not only individuals, but our overall economy. And of course, we have standing the third question to bring this action because the president is taking money from our state budgets. It is impossible for states to effectively budget for an upcoming school year through their departments of education and through our departments of education to our local communities when the president takes the football away from us, like Lucy in a Charlie Brown cartoon. So when this happens, as has happened before, we're going to bring actions, and frankly, we're going to win. We have yet to lose one of these funding cases because what the president is doing is so palpably wrong. So I'm proud to stand with my colleagues from Colorado and California and Massachusetts and across this country and file this action in Rhode Island, where I have no doubt that we will be successful. And we will continue to fight for Rhode Islanders and Americans where the president violates the law in this way.
Thank you, AG Neronha and my colleagues. We will continue to stand up for the rule of law, for our democracy, for the funding that we are owed, for the separation of powers, and stand up for our children, our parents, our public school system, and continue to mount the firm and resolute defense that we've had. We will be resolute and uncompromising and unapologetic in our commitment to the rule of law being followed and having a presidential administration that follows the law. With that, we'd be happy to take any of your questions. If you'd like to direct them to a specific attorney general, please specify.
If you would like to ask a question, you may do so by clicking on the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. You will then be moved to the queue. We will call on you. Please state your publication, as well as if you are asking a specific attorney general. You may also submit any questions through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. First question comes from Michael. You are now unmuted.
Please unmute your device.
Michael, can you unmute?
Can't hear you, Michael.
Okay, while Michael figures out unmuting, we have a question for Rhode Island. The question is, with the time sensitivity of these funds, how soon might this be resolved?
Well, we're hoping to get injunctive relief from the court very quickly. And so this is not a case where we would wait to try to see success down the road. In every one of our funding cases, we have sought injunctive relief in the very near term. We're a matter of days or weeks, not months. And the reason is because losing this funding, as you point out in your question, is incredibly important that we get it resolved quickly. The school year is upon us, and this is impacting summer programs as well. So you can see why. Certainly, there was work to be done to pull the case together, but we filed it as quickly as we could, and that's because of the great work over many late nights and weekends of the staffs of each one of our offices.
Michael, were you able to unmute? Okay. Next up, we have Joe. Joe.
Hi, this is Zoe
Oh, Zoe.
Tillman.
Sorry.
Okay. Hi, this is Zoe Tillman with Bloomberg. Thanks for doing this. This is for any of the attorneys general. I saw in the preliminary injunction you're asking for relief for the impacted programs in the plaintiff states. Can you talk about whether the CASA ruling recently had any impact on, the decision about what kind of relief to ask for in this case, whether you might have considered asking for nationwide relief before CASA, or if this was just not that kind of case? Any discussion of whether, that had a bearing on the thinking here?
I'm happy to jump in and grab this one.
Please.
It is important to note we have brought a significant number, as AG Bonta noted, of these funding cases where mandated funding was not provided in a lawless way. In every single one of those funding cases we've brought, the relief only applies to the states who are named plaintiffs. As was noted, Pennsylvania and Kentucky, because of their governors, are part of this case, so they can get the benefit. We have been doing that all along because we recognize that where the nature of the relief lends itself to only the states who are suing, we ask for relief in that form. Colorado gets the share that we're promised, California, et cetera. What was the case in the birthright citizenship case was the nature of the relief that had to be provided we saw as universal, because it would be inadministrable. It would be chaos to have, I'll use Colorado as a case, someone who's a Coloradan happens to give birth in Kansas. Is that baby a birthright citizen? What if they return to Colorado to become a birthright citizen? How about someone in Kansas gives birth in Colorado, goes back to Kansas? It doesn't work. That's why we continue on remand in that case to push for a universal nationwide injunction. By contrast, in these cases, we've always been seeking for funding only for those states who are pressing for relief. In short, the recent Supreme Court case didn't really bear on our decision here. Our decision here is consistent with all such prior cases.
I'll add as well that the Democratic attorneys general have never argued that nationwide injunctions are always appropriate, and we've never argued that they're never appropriate. They're sometimes appropriate, and a nationwide injunction is appropriate in the birthright citizenship case, as A.G. Weiser has just described and explained. Here we have 24 states and D.C. who are seeking relief, and the relief for those plaintiff states represents about $3.6 billion total in funding. We've definitely had cases in the past where Democratic AGs have gone to court, stood up for the rule of law, fought for a lawful presidential administration, and Republican AGs who have sat on their hands, done nothing, have not had the courage to stand up for their people, for the rule of law, for the rights and protections of their constituents, have drafted on and benefited from our work. They're going to have to step up now and fight for the funding that they feel they deserve, if they feel they deserve it, or do some explaining to their children and students in their states, or the parents in their states, the teachers in their states, those who run the public school, the principals who run the public schools, and explain why they're allowing the president to break the law, pull funding that they deserve, and violate the separation of powers. That'll be up to them. But here, we are seeking relief for our states, and 24 states and the District of Columbia are stepping up to do exactly that.
Next question is for AG Campbell. Beyond the legal battle, what are the potential short and long-term impacts of these funding cuts on public education in Massachusetts, particularly in regard to mental health services, special education, and underserved communities?
Thank you for the question. At least in this particular lawsuit for Massachusetts, it's $107 million that are at stake. And as I mentioned earlier, it goes to a wide array of educational services, mental health services included in that. When you think about after-school programming, extracurricular activities, this helps a child in their mental health and well-being. When you think about what the instruction should look like with inter-school and individualized learning opportunities for our students, that includes mental health components. So it will devastate not only in the short term, but the long-term effect of our school districts and local school districts and their collaborative organizations that they work with every single day. it will devastate their ability to provide these services. And as we saw in other funding lawsuits that had to do directly with behavioral health services, which are also our target for this federal administration, it is having an effect on even the human capital, school counselors, mental health clinicians that are at our schools. So there are separate cases too that are challenging the unlawful actions of this administration to cut resources, especially when it comes to the human capital that school districts need. And as we all know, we have a mental health epidemic, not just here in Massachusetts, but across the country, that will only be exacerbated if we're not able to continue to fund our school districts, relying not only on state resources, but federal resources. So we can certainly follow up, I think, with this local reporter with specific numbers as our Department of Education has gotten a handle on where these cuts will have an impact in the short term, but most importantly, the gaps that school districts will have to fill because of the chaos and uncertainty.
Next question comes from Ashley. Ashley, you are now unmuted.
Hi, my question is for Attorney General Rob Bonta. Actually, this one's on topic. I do have an off-topic one if you'll indulge me after this one, Mr. Attorney General. My on topic is, I mean, at this point, I mean, I know there's a lot of, we're getting to the point where there's so many lawsuits that have been filed, a lot of funding at question. I mean, as a former state lawmaker, do you anticipate that our legislature might have to come back in an off period to figure out some of these funding gaps that the state is facing, especially, now that we're talking about education?
Hi, Ashley. Thank you for your question. Don't want to speak for the legislature, although I'm grateful for their efforts to continue to advance our values here in California and push back against some of these unlawful actions. They've been a great ally, including providing support for the work that we're doing in our office and giving more budget allocation for us to beef up our teams so that we can make sure we're defending California, including the funding that we are owed. And we've been able to stop the withholding of billions of dollars in funding already. So we're grateful. They'll have to decide what is most appropriate in California, but the amount of these funds, especially in aggregate, if you think about the 8 education cases that we have, or in aggregate, when you think about the 31 now cases that we have, and this same move has been used time and time again, an attempt to block already congressionally appropriated funding. Those are actions that blow holes in budgets. They are very difficult to backfill entirely. Can they be mitigated? Perhaps. Are there efforts from state legislatures that can be taken to help reduce some of the harm? Very possibly. But these are devastating, and they are delivering great pain and damage to children, to schools, to teachers, to parents, to families. So I'm not sure what the legislature will do, but I know that they've been great partners. They share values, and I know that they will take appropriate actions to protect the people of California and make sure that we are able to protect and secure our future.
Thank you. And my off-topic one, and I really appreciate you making yourself available today, Mr. Attorney General. Just locally here in Sacramento, we have a situation unfolding with an explosion that killed 7 people in Esparto. And that investigation now is tied to multiple Yolo County officials. And the state fire marshal continues to allow Yolo County to have an active role in that investigation. And we've been trying, I mean, even over the weekend, to get a sense of like what is happening to avoid a conflict of interest here. And I want to be sensitive to the fact that I know your office doesn't confirm or deny investigations, but this is, again, a very unique situation in which, I mean, a sheriff's deputy and even now the sheriff has sort of backed away from this investigation, but we can't get answers about how exactly the sheriff's department and the state fire marshal are really ensuring the integrity of that investigation. So I just wonder, in a very long-winded way, I mean, what your office is doing, at what point might you get involved, if you will get involved, anything that you can share just as the state's top law enforcement official on this situation.
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. First, I'll say we're watching closely. We're aware of the situation on the ground. We're certainly also aware of the state's actions and their explanations, that actions that they've taken to maintain the integrity of the investigation, to maintain an appropriate degree of independence. So we continue to watch closely, and Cal Fire has made a statement and taken actions, acknowledging and being aware of exactly what you point out, with respect to Yolo County and its role. So I think the CHP secured the perimeter as well, and the fire marshal took steps to make sure that the integrity of the investigation is maintained. But it's dynamic. We realize that. We'll continue to monitor and watch closely, and for the time being, that's what we're doing.
Thank you. I have one other off topic if you'll indulge me, but if not, if there are other questions, I'm happy to just step back.
I'll defer to Bethany. I'm happy to take any questions on anything, but I want to also respect the time of my colleagues here who are here to talk about this case. Maybe we can circle back with you, Ashley.
Thank you.
Next question comes from Aton. You are now unmuted.
Thank you so much. This is for Attorney General Bonta. And you know what, every time that you hold a press conference, and just like Ashley said, we do appreciate you taking the time, really. You hold a press conference on a lawsuit. And I know the Rhode Island Attorney General did speak about this, but I just want to hear it from Attorney General Bonta as well. I do like to ask this question each time, and that's as such. Are you confident you can win?
We're confident. And thanks, Eitan. Appreciate your presence and your question. We bring cases when the law and facts dictate we're going to win. We don't bring cases when we have nothing but political grievance or ideological or political difference that would be inappropriate. We go to courts of law to seek relief when the facts and the law indicate that a law has been broken and relief is appropriate. That's what we've done here. And this is a common maneuver, if you will, that the Trump administration has taken time and time again. And in other cases where they've taken this exact same maneuver, tried to block or stop, withhold the flow of already congressionally appropriated funding, we have prevailed. And we believe we will prevail again here. So we're confident. And of course, we will present our strongest case to the court, and they will make the final decision, but we're confident that the decision will be in our favor.
Thank you. Next question comes from Howard. Howard, you are now unmuted.
Hi. So thanks to all of you for doing this. And anyone could take this question, I suppose. It's a two-part question. The cuts that you are fighting in this funding, that money that has been held back, are also part of the funding proposal for the upcoming federal fiscal year. So in other words, even if you get this money back because it's being inappropriately withheld, the Trump administration wants to make these same cuts in the next budget that they have authority over. And I'm wondering what your long-term concerns are over the programs that you're trying to protect because of this, and whether it's just a matter of time before these cuts are made anyway. And the second question is, to your knowledge, has the Trump administration tried to use the rescission process that is at its disposal in these cuts, or are these cuts or the held back funds in a sort of legal limbo where the administration is not using the power it does have to request congressional rescission, and it isn't releasing the money either, and it's just not doing anything? And I'm wondering what you can say about the legality and if there's any precedent for that.
I'm happy to start. The point you make is worth lifting up. There's a legal and right way to run the federal government. It's according to the Constitution, which means the budget gets made by Congress, who mandates and authorizes and appropriates funds for education programs and decides, case of Colorado, that $80 million is coming our way. This administration has sought time and again to subvert, to undermine this constitutional separation of powers. If this administration wants to recommend a budget to Congress, Congress then has the legal authority to decide on the budget. That's its power of the purse. And we will fight in Congress for education funding. That's, if you will, tomorrow's challenge. Today's challenge is this administration ignoring the Constitution, seeking to act with absolute power and in violation of separations of powers. We are going to check their abuse of power, their illegal actions here. And then finally, as for what is the basis of their action, they've just claimed this, again, heretofore never seen power of review. For the first time, they're saying we're just holding up these funds that are mandated because we're going to review them to see whether or not they're appropriate. That is a direct affront to separation of powers. There's no basis for this action. It is plainly harmful. That's why we're going to court.
Next question is for AG Weiser. Like districts across the country, Colorado school districts are facing an enormous amount of uncertainty going into the next school year. What do you say to Colorado district leaders who are having to make very tough decisions about staffing and programs right now because they don't know if they'll get their share of these 80 million in frozen grant funds?
My message to school leaders, to teachers, to parents, and to students is I have your back, and that what is happening here is wrong morally, wrong policy-wise, and wrong legally. And we are confident we will get this funding restored as soon as possible. AG Neronha made a point I want to emphasize. People from our four offices worked starting, I mentioned July 3rd, over July 4th weekend because of how important this is. We understand that public education is the gateway to opportunity for all, and the support our kids need is more important than ever. So we hear you, we have your back, we're fighting hard on your behalf, and we're going to win. That's my message.
Next question comes from Eric. Eric, you're now unmuted.
Hi, I wanted to follow up on a prior question. I know AG Bonta answered about the perhaps backfilling this in the state budget and how hard it is. I'm curious from the other AGs in your states how the budget picture is shaping out and whether you would like lawmakers to maybe revisit and backfilling funding that has been cut.
Well, I'll jump in here and just comment in this fashion that we have a part-time legislature here, and they just concluded their session. It was a very difficult budget year, and choosing at the end, for example, between healthcare, shoring up Rhode Island's healthcare system, which badly needs it, against other issues of need and the need to raise fees on Rhode Islanders and others to meet those needs. So I can't speak for my fellow states, but I can say that in Rhode Island, in the last several years, it's always been a challenging time for the legislature. My hope is that before they come back, or scheduled to come back on January 1st, far before then, we'll have this resolved. I really am hoping and expecting that this will be resolved in our favor. Not, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, and I don't obviously want to speak for the court. We have to make our points there as well. But based on the track record, because it really is, as I said earlier, we've seen this story before. We've been in the ring before with these sorts of cases, and we've had great success because the violations of the law are so obvious. So my hope is that with respect to these funds, there won't be a need to call our legislature back because we will have the funds reinstated in short order. That's the goal. That's our expectation. We have to make the arguments in court, of course. But based on the track record, based on the fact that we've seen these violations, these same violations of the law in other funding contexts, it's my hope and expectation we'll have this money restored very quickly.
Next question for AG Bonta. Could you please speak to the expected outcome of this lawsuit? Specifically, how might it impact immigrant communities here in California? Do you have any data or projections that illustrate the potential effects?
Thank you for the question. I wanted to raise up a point and put a little more detail on it that was made earlier by a number of us on this call, which is that when we have taken action like we are today against similar unlawful and unconstitutional conduct from the presidential administration, we have won. And this is our eighth case in the broad education space. When preliminary injunctions have been issued in those cases, we have secured them. We have prevailed, including in our case challenging AmeriCorps funding, our case that dealt with COVID recovery funding to address learning loss and mental health of students and technological infrastructure. And so we have prevailed in the past, and we believe we will do so again here. So if those prior cases are indications of future results, and they're not necessarily, of course, but they are very persuasive. We believe that we will prevail again in this case. One of the key areas of attempt by the federal administration to cut funding is funding that goes to children who are sons and daughters of migratory Californians who are moving. As the work they do is seasonal. It means they change schools. It means they need some stability and extra support to maintain the consistency and quality of their education and their learning. And that is a very appropriate and thoughtful policy that looks at the different experiences of our students and provides them the unique, appropriately tailored support that they need. And so this will impact this cut, if it's allowed to go through, will impact our immigrant communities, our children of parents who do seasonal work and are migratory in that regard with their work patterns. And so there is definitely an impact here when it comes to a potential impact on our immigrant communities, and our efforts to block the withholding of the funding will help secure that support, those resources, those programs and services that we should be providing to our immigrant communities.
Similarly, have you heard from organizations that work with migrant workers, particularly undocumented workers, about how freezing funds for after-school programs have hurt workers? This reporter has heard that workers have stopped seeking help from these organizations due to fear about ICE.
I want to also add, we got a preliminary injunction in our Department of Education reduction in force case. So again, when orders have been issued by courts in our education cases, in cases similar to this one, we have won. So I give that to you for situational awareness and context for this case. We've been in constant contact with organizations that represent immigrants by affirmative action, reaching out, and our efforts to reach out and make sure that we're in touch, that we're available. We have a whole team, the Community Awareness Response and Engagement Team, that does outreach. We held roundtables all across the state talking to immigrant communities, and of course, we are always door open, phones on, ready to hear from immigrant communities as they reach out to us. We recently heard from folks in the United Farm Workers of America orbit who were concerned about the Ventura County raid. But your point is absolutely true. There's definitely a chilling effect. These ICE raids, the tactics that a court, by the way, last Friday found unlawful in terms of racial profiling and use of language and presence in certain locations and type of job, using those as factors to determine who to stop, detain, search, is unlawful. And that type of unlawful conduct and unlawful unconstitutional enforcement techniques, that definitely has a chilling effect in terms of our immigrant communities and their willingness to seek government services, go to school, go to healthcare appointments, go to their jobs. This is another aspect of that, the attempt to withhold this critical support for the children of migratory workers. So it's all part of a broader effort to intimidate and bully, and definitely has chilling and damaging effects on the ground in our communities, including our immigrant communities.
Next question comes from Erica. You're now unmuted.
Thank you for taking all these questions. In some of the previous lawsuits, and I'm thinking specifically today of the AmeriCorps lawsuit, but you all secure a preliminary injunction that should restore the funding, but then there continue to be ongoing issues or what looks like slow walking compliance. And I'm curious if you can sort of talk about what the experience has been to date trying to secure funding that's been withheld, and if you have concerns about how this case might play out, even if you prevail initially.
Well, maybe I'll just jump in here because of the fact that many of these funding cases have been filed here. So take, for example, the first funding case, which we refer to as the OMB memo case. That was the one that would have paused nearly all federal funding, including Medicaid, notwithstanding what the administration might say today about that fact. That's a fact, and we knew it here in Rhode Island because we tried to draw down Medicaid fund and we couldn't do it. So in that case here, we obtained a TRO within a matter of days, got a preliminary injunction after that from the district court here in Rhode Island. And you're absolutely right in your characterization of the federal government as slow walking compliance. Now, not universally, but here and there, and with this kind of funding or that kind of funding, the spigot was not turned on, and we had to go back to court 2 or 3 times. But we are highly vigilant about that. And every time we went back to court, we found success, and we found success very quickly. The same has been true with the public health funding case that we brought in Rhode Island. $11 million for public health funding. Actually, it's $11 billion across the country, $31 million here in Rhode Island for public health funding. Same thing. Preliminary injunction granted. Some slow walking by the administration, enforcement by the district court. Really not taking slow walking, if you will, as a satisfactory answer and really holding the feet to the fire. Does it require work on our part? Absolutely. Are we prepared to do it? Absolutely. So as we hear about these issues, we're back in court seeking enforcement, and that is true. Should we get an injunction, as we hope and anticipate, then if there were slow walking, we would do the same thing here. You know, those enforcement actions at the end of the day lead to contempt of the federal government. We haven't had to get there yet, but the government knows that. And at some point, they give in, and they have to date. And so should we get to that point in this case, we will be vigilant, and we will get the kind of enforcement of any injunction that should issue from the court.
You mentioned the AmeriCorps case. I went to the southern part of our state last week to check on some AmeriCorps programs. They are getting their guaranteed funding. And so what we do in our states is keep in touch with the grantees, and then exactly what Peter said, funnel those slow walking or those objectionable cases to make sure the law is being followed.
Thank you.
Next question is for AG Bonta. I understand that today's discussion centered around K-12 education, but could you speak to any initiatives or efforts related to higher education? As a reporter covering the Greater Bay Area, home to established institutions like UC Berkeley, San Francisco State, and Stanford, I'd like to know more about what college students can expect in response to the broader pushback against President Trump and Linda McMahon's actions impacting higher education.
Sure, absolutely. You know, we've often been asked, how do you set your agenda for what kind of cases that you'll bring? And the cases that we bring are fully reliant and dependent on what the Trump administration does. And our North Star is the rule of law, the Constitution, and making sure that the Trump administration only does lawful things. So it depends on him. And so these 8 cases, we didn't decide we wanted 8 cases in the K-12 education space. That's just they're in response to Trump's unlawful conduct in the education space. And he's also been unlawful when it comes to the higher education space, specifically when it comes to National Institutes of Health funding, NIH funding. We have 2 cases in that space where he has wrongly withheld funding for both direct costs and indirect costs for National Institutes of Health. This is critical research funding to tackle things like Alzheimer's and cancer and post-traumatic stress disorder, other key public health and health issues. Also, when it comes to National Science Foundation funding that goes to universities, including in those universities in California that receive it. We've taken steps and have a lawsuit in that regard. So those are 3 of our 31 lawsuits. They specifically impact universities and colleges in California and throughout the nation. And then when we don't necessarily have standing, but we care about an issue and want to get involved, we file amicus briefs. And you're well aware of the attacks by the Trump administration that are unlawful against Harvard University. We wrote an amicus brief in that regard as well, making sure that the principles at stake in that case are able to be addressed appropriately, and we don't want to see any harm to any other universities in that same regard where unlawful conduct by the Trump administration is targeted towards those universities. So those are just a few examples of some of our important work in the university and college space.
Okay, 2 more questions. You mentioned that California has filed 31 lawsuits against the Trump administration since the start of his 2nd term. How many successes have we seen since January?
We have, and court has issued an order, and at this point in the litigation, it's usually a temporary restraining order or preliminary injunction, we have prevailed. So the answer to your question is we have been broadly successful. And that's by design and intent, and the important thinking of our teams. Again, we bring cases when we've done a deep dive into the law and an appropriate review of the facts, and we applied a lot of the facts, and we've determined that unlawful conduct has been taken. And so we go to court and we secure the order. There have been cases where we have gone to court, filed the lawsuit, and had a restraining order within hours, like same day, not days, not weeks. Not months. And I know there's a view that litigation takes a long time. Some parts of litigation do take time to get to a final judgment in the case, but to get to a temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction, that can be very quick, especially when there is imminent irreparable harm, as there are in our cases. So we have secured many preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders. We can give you the full overview, but when courts make orders in our cases, we have broadly been prevailing.
Okay, last question is from Eitan. You are now unmuted.
Thank you so much, Attorney General. Just one more question for you. And I know that with so much of the education, well, there's been so much from the Trump administration in recent weeks, other drama about just the whole trans athletes, transgender athletes, and whether they should participate in women's sports and girls' sports. My only question is this at all related to that, or based on the 3-sentence email you got, that does not appear to be the case, and that could be a separate thing we see down the road where they're going to take more funds later on? See what I'm asking there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, the sort of vague, conclusory 3-sentence, quote unquote, reason, and it completely fails to meet the standards of an appropriate justification. Doesn't state that it's about any transgender athlete policy. It's very vague and legally inadequate to justify the actions here, and so that's why we're going to court. But separately, we do expect, and we do have cases with the federal government when it comes to the inclusive policies that we have in California, laws that we have on the books to provide an opportunity for athletes to participate in sports consistent with their gender identity. And so we will stand up for rights, protections, the law, the Constitution in those cases as appropriate. But I don't think this case is about transgender athletes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was the last question.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, colleagues. And thank you for joining us today. We appreciate the time and the opportunity to talk about this case with you, and we look forward to the next one. Thank you.